course, to receive a Jewish perspective on anything, the only place to look is in the Torah. And it has been the practice, it was the practice of my father, my grandfather, great-grandfather. Whenever they delivered a talk, they would always base their talk on the parsha of the coming Shabbos. And I will do the same. In this week's parsha, the Torah tells us, tzedek, tzedek, tirdo. You should pursue righteousness. Tzedek, tzedek, and the word tzedek is repeated. And we have to understand, first of all, what does the word tzedek mean? And why is it repeated? Rabbi Bachi and Kanak Hemach points out that the reason tzedek is repeated is to inform us and teach us that our obligation to chase tzedek does not only apply with other Jews, it applies in our relationships with the Ummah Sa'olam, the nations of the world also. What does tzedek mean? The commentators on the verse offer many interpretations. However, the word tzedek is found in various places through the Tanakh. One of the psukim where the word tzedek is used is Perek Peites in Tehillim, Pasuk Tesvav. A pasuk, a verse, which is repeated many times throughout the high holidays. Tzedek u'mishpat mechon kisecha, chesed v'emes yikadmu fanecha. We describe God as the foundation of His throne of glory is tzedek and mishpat. Righteousness and mishpat and law. And the Radak on the pasuk points out that tzedek and mishpat are very similar. But even though tzedek and mishpat are similar, they are also different. How do we define tzedek and how do we find mishpat? My father, Rabbi Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, pointed out that every Jewish person or even human being has an obligation in his relationship and how he deals with other people. There's a way to deal with people in business. There's a way to speak to people. And this is mishpat. Mishpat governs the area of relationship between man and man. But our concern for our friend, our fellow human being, is not limited to the direct relationship we have with them, but even to the indirect. We as Jewish people have an obligation to look, to understand, and to listen to the problems that our fellow human beings are suffering and dealing with. It is not enough for us to say that I've acted properly and in my community everything is going all right. But the burdens of the world, the whole world, have to be placed on our shoulder. In other words, the word tzedek governs those areas where we have a responsibility to look out for the rest of the world. As the pasuk says in Bereshis Perek Beis, pasuk Tezvav, V'yikach Hashem Elokim es ha'adam v'yanichehu b'gan Eden lo'avdo l'shamra. God took Adam and He placed him in the Garden of Eden in order to work the garden and to watch it. It's not enough to develop the world. We are shomrim, per se, on the world to ensure that the world remains in its perfect state, and that includes being concerned about the needs of all human beings. And this obligation of being concerned about the needs of all human beings, Jews and even non-Jews, being activists on behalf of important causes, is really what defines a Jew. Torah tells us, Yehuda ati yaducha achicha. In Parshas Vayechi, the end of Sefer Bereshis. When Yaakov Avinu was blessing his sons prior to his death, and he turns to Yehuda, his son Yehuda, and he says that all your brothers, your mother, and myself, your father, thank you. And not only that, Rav Shimon bar Yochai adds, all your brothers will be called by your name. There were 12 tribes in Israel, and we don't refer to the Jews as Reuveni, as Shimoni, as Zebuluni. All the Jews are referred to as Yehudi, after the Shevet of Yehuda. It says, Ein Adam Omer Reuveni Ana, Reuveni Shimoni Ana, El Yehudi Ana. I am Yehudi, I am a Jew. What was unique about Yehuda? Because Yehuda was the brother who saw his brother Binyamin in trouble and stepped in on behalf of Binyamin. He was a brother who showed concern, who was active, who led the way. Who led the way for his other brothers, for all of Klal Yisrael, to become activists on behalf of the whole nation. And the first person after Yehuda who followed his example, who taught us that to be a Jew means to be an activist, was nobody less than the great Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, who spent many years in the palace of Paro, many years living amongst the Egyptians, understanding what the Egyptian culture is, and not really experienced in Judaism. And then, Moshe Rabbeinu reached the stage of adulthood. And he went out to his brothers because he wanted to experience what the Jewish people were feeling. And what is the first act? What is the first lesson the Torah records to us about Moshe Rabbeinu? He saw an Egyptian man smiting one of his brothers, his Jewish brethren. And Moshe Rabbeinu did not turn away and say, it's none of my business. I'll be a good Jew. Moshe Rabbeinu understood it to be a Jew means responsibility, achrayut, towards the Am. And he stood up and he defended his afflicted Jewish brother. But that wasn't enough. It's not enough just to be active on behalf of the Jewish people as they are being persecuted by the Ummah Sa'olam, by our enemies, by the wicked Egyptians. Moshe Rabbeinu saw a problem amongst the Jews. He came out on the second day and he saw there were two Jewish people fighting. And again, Moshe Rabbeinu did not decide to ignore the event. Moshe Rabbeinu interrupted the fight and he asked, Lama Sakar Yacha? How can Jewish people fight? If Jewish people can fight, we can never ever expect to see the redemption. Moshe Rabbeinu taught us, in his very first lesson, our responsibility to be active for the Jewish people, whether they are being persecuted by the Ummah Sa'olam, and for the Jewish people, whether they are fighting amongst themselves. However, the lesson of Moshe Rabbeinu on activism was not finished. In the same chapter, Pasuk Yud Zayin, as Moshe Rabbeinu, who's being pursued, chased, afraid for his life, arrives in Midian, and at this point, he does not really understand that he is destined to have a tie with the family of Yisro. And he comes to the bear in Midian, the well, and Yisro's daughters, the fact that they were not the male shepherds, were being persecuted and harassed by the shepherds at the well, by Yavo, Harom, by Yegorashum, and Moshe Rabbeinu beholds how the shepherds, the strong, mighty shepherds, are chasing away the daughters of Yisro. And Moshe Rabbeinu, knowing that these were not Jewish people, Moshe Rabbeinu not knowing who these shepherds were, Vayakam Moshe, Vayoshiyam, Vayashkitzonam. Moshe Rabbeinu got up and he saved them, and he was able, he gave the sheep of Yisro's daughters to drink. So we see Moshe Rabbeinu in his very first lesson is teaching us the importance of standing up on behalf of all human beings, Jew or non-Jew alike, when they are being persecuted by the wicked men of the world, the Rishonim of the world. The job of the Jew is to stand up and say, enough! This is not the way Bnei Adam, the descendants of Adam, who are brothers, are supposed to act. And we have to stand up on behalf of all our persecuted brethren, all the creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in truth, it was this concept of activism which ensures the continuity of the world. In Parshas Bereshis, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is observing the world and all its wickedness right before the Mabul, Torah tells us in Bereshis Perek Vav, Vayaro Hashem ki rabba ra'asa adam ha'aretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, behold, the evil of man was very great on the land. V'chol yetzer machshavos libo rak kol hayom. And his whole intention, his intention was evil the whole day. And therefore God decided to destroy the world. And in Bereshis Perek Ches, after the Mabul, after the flood, as Moshe Rabbeinu, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is again observing the world, and Noach leaves the teva, and he offers sacrifices to God. The Torah tells us, Vayorach Hashem esreach anichoach, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu smelled the sweet smell. And he said, Lo asif lekalel odes adam abavur adam. I will not continue to curse the ground because of man. Ki yetzer leiv ha'adam rami nurav, v'lo asif ol ha'kotet kol chai kasher asisi. Why? Ki yetzer leiv ha'adam ra. Because the intention of man is evil. So before the Mabul, before the flood, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to destroy the world. Ki rabba ra'asa adam ha'aretz, v'chol yetzer machshos libo rak kol hayom. Because of man's evil intention decided to destroy the world. And after the Mabul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to maintain the world in its state for the same reason. Ki yetzer leiv ha'adam ra min urav. What changed? And the Ramban points out, the schus was that the yetzer hara of man comes when he is young, comes when he is a child. And for that reason, God decided to destroy the world. We have to understand, what is it about children that God decided to maintain the world? What is it about children that the Ramban is trying to point out? My father again explained that children have the midah of copying. They have role models. They're always looking after other people to imitate. They're the greatest imitators. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw the world before the Mabul, he said, "V'chol yetzer machshos libo rak kol hayom." Everyone is evil. And there is no chance for survival of the world because everyone will continue to imitate the previous generation. Everyone will imitate, will go after the majority. So there was no hope for the world. But after the Mabul, when he smelled the sweet korban of Noach, all of a sudden he realized, yes, why is it that we imitate people? It's only because Minurav, we're like children. We have this midah, this attribute, a follow the leader. But if that's the only reason we're evil, because we like to follow the leader, God said there's a hope for the world. Because there will be people who will stand up. They will stand up against the tide. They will stand up against what's accepted and speak out for what's right. And with this we can understand the Medrash, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu smelled the reach hanichoach. He didn't just smell the korbanot of Noach. The Medrash tells us he smelled the korbanot of Avram Avinu going up in fire in the kitchen shalesh. At the time after the Mabul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu smelled Avram Avinu as Nimrod threw him into the fire for worshiping God. And he smelled the reach of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the great leaders of Klal Yisrael, who chose to be thrown into the fire as opposed to serving up, worshiping Avodah Zarah, worshiping idolatry. What is the connection between the Karbanot of Noach and Adam Avinu, Hanani, Mishael, Azariah? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that time smelled the potential of man to stand up against what the majority is saying, to scream and protest on behalf of what is right. And because of this, God said, I will save the world. There's only these people like Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, Adam Avinu who have the courage to stand up. Who have the courage to stand up against the world, the tide, even the Jewish leaders at some time who ensure the continuity of the world. In Parak Dalet of Sefer Shmos, Torah refers to Am Yisrael as B'ni B'chori. The Sforno points out the firstborn, because even though there will be a day when all the nations will recognize God, God then will be one, and everyone will work for perfection in the world, that will only come about through the teaching and inspiration of the Jewish people. And therefore we have Jews as have an obligation to follow the example of many who stood up against certain Jewish leadership, many Jewish leaders, Torah leaders who stood up, and others, as the evening is dedicated to Hillel Bergman, Hillel Kook, have an obligation to stand up and learn from them, to stand up against what's wrong, not only in areas that affect us as Jewish people, but areas that affect us as descendants of Adam, us as members of this civilization. Thank you very much.